Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. It's been 6 months since Hurricane Helene left a path of destruction through western North Carolina. Many of the people whose homes were badly damaged are still waiting on aid and repairs, and in some cases, still waiting on basic necessities like water or power. WRAL's Willie Daniely spoke to an Ashe County woman whose home still doesn't have running water. Willie, thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be back.
You know, you're sharing her story on Thursday on WRAL. How did you meet the woman at the center of this story?
I met Michelle Denny through another woman named Lila Furrow, who I met on Facebook. I was doing a story about Governor Stein's Hurricane Helene relief bill, and I was connected with Lila Furrow, who's been doing some independent volunteer work on the ground in Ashe County where she lives. And she connected me with Michelle Denny and told me her story and all that she's been going through over the past few months. And after I spoke to Michelle on the phone, she was more than happy to invite us over to tell her story.
And what was your drive like when you went out to meet her? Where in Ashe County does she live?
She lives in Fleetwood. And I mean, we were going through western North Carolina. It was beautiful until you look a little bit closer and, you look at some of these houses as you're driving down the road and you really see the extent of the damage. Like you cannot go. I'd say once we were about 3 hours into the drive, that's when we started to see just how bad the damage was down there. Or even the waterways, the creeks and the rivers are just so much larger than they were 6 months ago now. And it was really amazing to see how much damage was really done there.
Yeah, I mean, were you surprised to still see that much obvious damage 6 months later?
I wasn't surprised, but I can say it was worse than what I thought it was going to be. I was in Asheville when the storm hit, so I saw the damage there, but I hadn't heard a lot about the damage in places like Ashe County and these small mountain communities in western North Carolina. But once we got up there, we really saw just how devastating the storm was on those people there. And, unfortunately, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people that are just like Michelle, who are struggling to get by 6 months after the storm. And, they always talk about when they're up there, the mentality of the people who live up there. They don't ask for help. They, just tough through with whatever they can and whatever they can find. So, there's a lot of people up there that are in desperate need of help who aren't getting any of it.
Right. And what are the conditions at Michelle's home once you got there? And what story did she tell you about what her experience was like with the storm?
When we got to Michelle's house, it was terrible. And it looked I saw before and after photos and it looked unrecognizable. The house was almost swept off of the foundation during the storm. There was mold damage inside, water damage inside the home. And, up until like 2 or 3 weeks ago, Michelle had been living in this house. So it was really jarring to see what she had to go through those last few months staying in that home. I mean, she didn't even have a toilet. Luckily, a small church came and donated a compost toilet for her, and that's how she had to use the restroom. And that compost toilet was in her bedroom because she had closed off so many other rooms in her house that she was only limited to using 2 rooms inside the house that weren't severely damaged by the storm.
Let's take a quick break right there and we'll be right back. Willie, before the break, you were telling us about the extensive damage to Michelle Denny's house, the fact that she doesn't have running water. Why hasn't her well been able to be fixed yet?
Well, according to the EPA, it's the well owner's responsibility to bring safe drinking water to their property. So it's really no one else's responsibility to do that. But, Michelle is an older woman who's lived in her home her entire life. She's never actually come across this problem of well water contamination. And, for someone who's not a scientist and not an expert, it's only so many things that she knows how to do. She doesn't have a computer. She doesn't have access to, just Google anything she wants anytime she wants. So, it's just a lot of things that she's just not knowledgeable of. And there's no one who's come by to offer to help. Up until there were volunteers who live in Ashe County who took it upon themselves to just go around asking people what they need and doing their best to connect people with someone who can get their problem solved. So there is a volunteer who's not affiliated with any organization who's been coming by Michelle's house and helping her through the process of getting her well water tested.
Wow. And that feels like a pretty unique situation to her, but do you have any sense of how widespread that problem might be? Just sort of the access to help and the ability to get that help. How many people are still in limbo on getting repairs and aid because of situations like Michelle's?
It's really hard to estimate. Driving through, I could tell you we saw hundreds of houses that look similar to Michelle. And speaking to the volunteers who joined us going to Michelle's house, they're working with, tens of other people, and they're doing this themselves. And, those volunteers, they're maxing out their own credit cards, trying to help people like Michelle. And Michelle also has a very unique situation that honestly a lot of other people in that area are going through as well. She inherited her home from her mother. That house was originally her grandmother's. And so, as her grandmother's died and her mother has died, no one has changed the name on that property. So when FEMA comes in and, they're offering this help, Michelle's trying to accept that help, but because her name is not on the deed of the house, there's so many what's the word I'm looking for? There are just so many hoops that they have to jump over that, and they need that help immediately. They don't have time to go through all of those different, processes. But, understandably, FEMA can't just give everyone money unless they have, the proper documents. So it's been extremely hard for people up there. And it's a lot of people who are in that situation and who don't know who to turn to, honestly.
Right. And, I know just after the storm, we were collecting a lot of donations, both money and also supplies for people in need. Is there anything that people can still do to help?
Yes, there's a lot that people can do to help. I encourage people to take that drive from Raleigh. It's a 4-hour drive to Fleetwood. It's a beautiful drive, but you can really go there and you can see for yourself. And talking to those people, hearing what they need. They're not asking for the world. They're asking for the bare necessities. These are some of these people don't have places that they can use the restrooms. So compost toilets, things like that are so small. And then, even beyond going out there to see it for yourself, there are places like the North Carolina Community Foundation that are still accepting donations so they can create grants and send that money to Western North Carolina to help those people who are in desperate need.
Does Michelle have any idea when she might be able to move back into her home?
Well, now Michelle was lucky enough. Those volunteers found someone who donated a camper. So Michelle has a camper that's set up right next to her house. So she's no longer sleeping in that environment. And Habitat for Humanity is actually in the process of dropping off those supplies so that they can get to work to repair her home. So she's hoping by the end of this year, she can be back in that house. And, like I said, that's a place that she's lived her entire life. She never wants to move anywhere else. So I'm really hoping that process moves along quickly for her.
Yes, I wish her the best, and I know that you'll stay on top of it for us, Willie. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.